you everyone for being here today, and welcome you to our City Hall chambers. And always appreciate people showing up to be a part of our meetings here. And I'm calling this special City Council meeting to order. And our first item of business will be hearing citizen comments. And I believe we do have citizen comments today. So if you will step forward, give us your name and your address, and then you'll have 3 minutes to make your citizen comments. So who's first up today? I don't have a list yet. Okay. Discuss amongst yourselves. Do we have 3? Is that what we have today? 3 citizen comment? 2? 5. All right. First of all is Stephen Falk. Mr. Falk, you come forward.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, my name is Stephen Falk. I have property at 2022 Broadway. I'm here to speak to you about your resolution 2.1, a bit of history. Most of you weren't involved in this, but I bring it to your attention, and there's a letter I wrote the mayor. I hope each one of you have gotten a copy. There was an ordinance that protected the brick streets of Lubbock, Texas, duly brought up, voted, and made public and enforceable. That's part of the previous zoning code, I'm told, though I thought it was a standalone ordinance. Then the UDC comes along, and I'm quoting now, it was unintentionally deleted. Forgive me, nothing is unintentionally deleted. Because what that has done is opened the door for y'all to consider paving materials for Broadway that are not historic brick. Can be asphalt, can be concrete. Not the best materials, and I'm putting aside the historic nature, because brick's gonna last about 100 years, whether it's new brick or old brick. Someone's gonna get up here in a while and tell you the historic brick is not worth a darn. I disagree completely. I've been at this profession for 53 years. I put down hundreds of thousands of square feet of paving, of asphalt, concrete, and brick. I'm very, very, very suspect of an unintentional deletion. I urge you to consider looking into that before you act on one of your resolutions 2.1 today and really find out what happened. Again, nothing is unintentionally deleted. I also want to speak to the Citizens Advisory Committee findings that are going to be presented to you today. It is my understanding when a member of that committee put on the table the durability of various kinds of materials, how many times you would have to replace asphalt over a 100-year period, the time you would have to replace concrete over a 100-year period, and how long brick would last, they were shut down, not considered. Trust me, you don't want to put down asphalt. I encourage you to drive 19th Street. Supposed to be just a 3-year project. I bet it will be 4. I got to drive Q when the same thing happened. Concrete. I encourage you to look at University Avenue from 19th to Broadway. It's cracked, it's patched, and it looks like, I can't use that right C word, but crud. The expansion joints have opened up. It's going to leak and fail. I really encourage you to, 1, find out how come this ordinance was unintentionally deleted to protect the brick streets, and 2, reconsider whatever recommendations are made to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Next, we have Robert Henry. Mr. Henry?
How How y'all doing? My name is Robert Henry. I live at 5233 20th Street. And I'm just going to read this because my mother would have been here, but she's in the hospital. But I wrote this from my perspective. I recently moved back to Lubbock, Texas, and thought it might be a good idea to give y'all an outsider's perspective about this issue. For the record, I think it'd be a huge mistake to remove the brick streets. I've had a crazy life. I grew up in San Antonio, lived in Dallas, New York, Austin, State College, Pennsylvania, and most recently Los Angeles, California. I've also lived in Salzburg, Austria, Takasaki, Japan, and London, England. The reason I bring this up is that I've seen these kinds of things done the right way and the wrong way. Certain cities were better about keeping their original charm, and others just wanted to focus on the short-sighted. My flat and surrounding areas in London will be here long after I am gone. So will the San Antonio Riverwalk. But my neighborhoods in Austin and my apartment in Los Angeles, they're not going to look anything recognizable in the next couple of years. I'm an actor. Since moving back, I've found that there are a lot of us that have moved back for different reasons. And we've all kind of said the same thing. We all want to create. We want to create something here. We like it. We like the ease and the charm of the city, especially downtown. And a big part of that charm is the revitalization going on. For example, this building we're sitting in right now. And we just like the feel of it, like anything is possible. And a not so insignificant part of that is the feel we get from the look and the feel of the streets and the safety of being able to walk around downtown. I tell everyone who will listen, I want to make a movie here. Even if it's not very good, it would put Lubbock on the map regarding people like the Texas Film Commission. It would show off our potential as a fantastic filming location, and that would bring business for everyone and everyone downtown. If you ripped out the streets, you might change my mind on that. I might still shoot at Luca, CASP, the Buddy Holly Center, but to get a good exterior, I'd have to go to Santa Fe or somewhere. And I don't want to do that because everybody else does that, and it's a pain in the neck. As far as the streets themselves, since I've been back, I've dealt with the mess that was and is on 19th and down on Avenue Q. If you think that ripping brick and throwing down regular, boring asphalt streets through downtown will be an improvement, think again. Not only are they just cooler, they're better. These bricks were laid in the 20s, and I've heard they've only been maintained twice in the last 100 years. Last time, I believe, was when I was in elementary school. I'm 52. So just take a second to think about what asphalt streets that hadn't been maintained for 40 years would look like right now. Fix the bricks, set out a plan to maintain them, get out of the way, and just watch what happens downtown. If you don't believe me, call someone in Breckenridge who have had their bricks since 1923. They maintained them in 2005, 19 years ago, and they're one of their favorite selling points. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Cindy Martin, Ms. Martin.
My name is Cindy Martin, and I live at 3701 97th Street. And I'm here to encourage you to reinstate the Brick Street Ordinance wherever you think it fits best, and to reconsider the upcoming recommendations concerning Broadway. Somehow, the ordinance protecting Lubbock's historic brick streets was inadvertently deleted with the adoption of the new Uniform Development Code last fall. Today, Council is hearing a recommendation from a committee on the street bond, which includes Broadway and its historic bricks. This committee has been working for the past month, and I might add that seems kind of like a short amount of time for adequate consideration. But at any rate, they've been working with the understanding that there is no protection for the bricks, no protective Brick Street Ordinance. Not only are the optics for this kind of really bad, it's just not good government. This ordinance was removed without due process, without public notice, without the opportunity for the public to comment, without discussion by the Planning and Zoning Commission, without comment by the Council's ad hoc QDC subcommittee, and without review by Council last fall. It was done in the dark and with no transparency. I'm not a conspiracy buff, but the fact that the city now may be poised to take advantage of the mistake certainly looks bad and fosters mistrust. Recent years have seen the tremendous development in the downtown area and the Depot and Arts districts, with new businesses, restaurants, brew pubs, apartments and lofts, and most of this isn't new construction. These businesses and even a home or two are utilizing and rehabbing older and historic structures. Lubbock isn't blessed with blocks and blocks of landmark historic buildings. A thriving downtown, depot, and arts districts are key to encouraging economic development of the city and universities and bringing people back like the last speaker. But businesses and individuals are voting with their money and investing in the revitalization of downtown through the use of historic structures. It's the historic character of downtown that's the draw, and the red brick streets, particularly on Broadway, are essential to that character. I urge the city to support the continued revitalization of downtown, maintain the historic brick streets on Broadway, reinstate the unintentionally deleted Brick Street ordinance. I encourage you to practice good government, to be a council that is open and transparent with Lubbock citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Mary Kreitz, and I understand someone is going to read a statement for you. Is that correct? Are you?
Don't start my 3 minutes. I've lost my voice. So I've asked Cindy Martin to read mine as well, and I have a handout for you.
It's Mary Kreitz, lives at 4617 8th Street. She's here to voice my concerns that the proposed street bond process has been much too rushed and not an example of open government. First off, District 2 didn't even have 2 members on the CAC. And what's with that? Certainly, it seems problematic in terms of fairly representing that district. Second, the CAC completed their task in only 13 days. That would be daunting even if Broadway wasn't expected to be on it. Much too rushed. Concerning Broadway, our most iconic street, we understand that just one segment, Avenue Q to Avenue E, is being recommended. Why start in the middle? Is that portion really more important than the western end by Texas Tech? Or why not start with Broadway from Avenue E to MLK, because it's less controversial? To assign Broadway a budget, CAC had to decide on its design. Is that really the purview of a bond committee, and in 13 days? This street is special, and decisions regarding it shouldn't be rushed. The downtown TIF, UDHB, as well as the citizen survey, all had historic brick as the favored material in at least the intersections, but that was ignored by the CAC once they heard that the 40-year-old brick street protection ordinance had been mistakenly deleted. A deletion that was done without due process, any notice, or opportunity for comment and review. Seems like CAC's goal was to take advantage of that mistake, and please don't do the same. I was astounded at how many citizens have told me they were confident that the timing of bond discussion was not a coincidence, but done specifically to take advantage of the sudden lack of protection of our brick streets. Furthermore, why is this bond even being presented as part of a budget workshop? It's not transparent and further evidence of a rushed process. I urge you to only consider Broadway if it follows the ordinance. An even better action would be don't include Broadway given what all has occurred. The city, through a selected design firm, could study several design options, develop more detailed budgeting, and most importantly, include more civic engagement. Slow down and have your actions actually confirm your stated commitment to open, transparent government. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kreitz, for that statement. And last, we have Adam Hernandez.
Good afternoon, Council. Adam Hernandez, 7401 Avenue X. I'm also Communications Chair on the Board of Lubbock Compact. I apologize for being so dressed down this afternoon. I wasn't planning on being here. I got alerted about a few minutes before this meeting took place. So I'd like to echo what the other speakers have talked about. This proposed street bond needs to go back to the committee, and that's pretty much where we need to go with it. I'm going to lay out some technical reasons why that should happen. Number one, from what I understand, calls were put out to those who served on the last bond committee. I served on that committee as vice chair. I didn't receive one of those calls. Fine. That left District 2 with only one representative. Interesting thing about that representative, Jaime De La Cruz, he also, just in the last sewer line committee, represented District 1. He's now representing District 2. So that's a discrepancy we need to figure out. That's number one. Number two, I'm pretty engaged in city processes, as you all know. I didn't know until a few days ago that this committee was done with its recommendations for a $100 million bond. So I want to break down what is in that $100 million bond. 18% goes to District 1, only one project. 7.1% goes to District 2, one project. The whole rest of the 75% go to Districts 4, 5, and 6. Now, the lion's share of that, about 65% or so, go to District 4 and 5. Now, just on its face, that's not fair to the citizens of this city who are all going to have to pay this regardless of where they live at. So this needs to be looked at in a way that's more equitable across the city. And for the cost of just one of these projects, Jackson-Mahon neighborhood, which was next on the list in terms of condition, you could have redone all of the streets in Jackson-Mahon neighborhood for just one of these projects. But the citizens didn't have the option to express that because we didn't know that this was even happening. All right. And so then you had the Brick Street situation, which was kind of questionable. All right. The way that this process was carried out, and I understand that it sounds good that we want to get roads fixed and we want to get Broadway done. Here's the thing with Broadway before I end off. Broadway has some prerequisites. It needs water and sewer done first before you do anything to Broadway. Broadway is not ready. Okay, so there's other things that need to happen. Last thing I'll say is that the way that this process was done, it's similar to making a cake when you have all the ingredients, but you don't use the proper amount of time in each of the steps. If you go forward and try to put this on a ballot, you're going to lose it. You're going to waste everybody's time. You're going to waste the money putting it on a ballot. So for those reasons, I think this needs to go back to a committee. The public needs to be properly engaged and have their voices heard. All districts need to be represented, and all districts need to have projects within this bond proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Okay, now we'll move forward with our regular agenda. And first on our agenda, item number 2.1 we'll take up now, which is to consider a resolution receiving, and all we're doing today is receiving a report and recommendation of the 2024 Citizens Advisory Committee related to the street needs within the city of Lubbock. And so now I'm going to call on Mr. Atkinson first.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Good setup. While we're talking, I'm going to ask Ms. Heather Keister. Heather is a two-time now chair for your Citizens Advisory Committee. I know she has many members of the committee in the audience with her, but Council, as the Mayor said, your only action today is to receive this report. If you take the next steps, those will be on your regularly posted Tuesday, August the 13th City Council meeting. So today is an opportunity for Heather and the committee to show you the results of their work, certainly for you to ask questions if you choose, and that will really wrap up for today. Ms. Keister?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Again, my name is Heather Keister. I was honored to chair this committee and appreciate the opportunity and put in a lot of hard work, our committee did, and we're excited to bring forward the recommendations that came out of that work for your consideration. So just a reminder, our committee was charged to provide input as representatives from the community. We were to study the need for roadway construction and come back to you, as we're doing today, with recommendations, which would include projects that were identified as needs, an estimate of costs to go with each of those projects, and then an appropriate funding mechanism. I've also shown the time frame here. I did this relative to the time frame we had in the last round. It was a quick turnaround. We were formed on July 2nd. We held 4 meetings. They were each 3 hours, so we had 12 hours of discussion over this, where we first started receiving the background information. We had a mix of new and repeat members. So Some background information, we did a prioritization exercise, and then we went to lengthy discussion about all the projects that were brought before the committee, and then we took votes to prepare our recommendation. This just shows the list of people who are on the CAC. I have several here today, everyone who could make it. I don't know if you guys can just raise your hand or stand up just to let everyone know that you are in fact real people. So Victoria Whitehead was elected the vice chair, and then we had representatives from each district. Also had significant support from city staff, which we appreciate very much. So those guys work really hard. I just want to say thank you to them for supporting us. So as we went through these discussions, we kind of laid out some objectives to guide our work. And one was, we're in a different spot than we were in the 2022 CAC. We are in the middle of a road bond. So the first question was, is there a need for another road bond? If there is, what is the appropriate timing of that? We also wanted to look at what we could learn from not just the 2022 bond, but all previous bond efforts, and then define what might be included if that were to be our recommendation. So now to talk about the projects that were considered. This slide right here is one from the 2022 recommendation slide deck. Broadway, I just want to show this as a reminder that in that effort, it was a big topic of discussion. At that time, the majority of the committee really wanted to tackle Broadway. However, ultimately, our recommendation did not include Broadway. We felt there was some time and effort needed to gain consensus and approval. I will tell you that I've got this laid out, the documentation of that effort. In my opinion, we will never reach unanimous opinion on what to do with Broadway. I acknowledge that. Our whole committee acknowledges that. We were trying to make the best decision that we could with the information that everyone has at this time. So just to recap that effort, we were very pleased and thankful that the council moved forward with the process. It was one of our recommendations was to move forward with this process, and we appreciate the city doing that. So just to recap that effort, the Broadway stakeholders include the Urban Design Historic Preservation Commission, so UDHPC, the Central Business District TIF, so CBD TIF, the general public, and then staff. And this is just a compilation of that input effort that happened during the 2023. So throughout that year, there were multiple meetings, individual committee meetings, as well as joint meetings that were conducted to gather input from these groups. There was also a public survey launched online to gather general public comments. There was a town hall meeting held, and all of that effort was really to take time to gather input on what to do with Broadway. So there were about 50 citizens in attendance at the town hall meeting. I've got the summary of the conversation that happened at that town hall meeting here on this slide. We were able to access the results from the public survey. So this is just a sampling of some of the questions. But in every situation, people were asked questions about what do you think Broadway should include, and got really into the nuts and bolts of that. And then what I've done here is I've taken all of that input. So the stakeholders, so the CBD TIF, the UDHPC, the public, and staff, and really boiled down that input into this matrix. And to me, what I like to do when I have an item where it doesn't feel like we have agreement, I think the best place to start rather than where we differ is where we can agree. And let's start with our points of agreement, and let's see what we can do with that. And so, believe it or not, there is some agreement here, and I just wanted to point that out. I'm going to go through that very quickly. I've separated Broadway into the different components that make up the street. That would be the driving lanes, the intersections, the crosswalks, medians or turn lanes, on-street parking, and bike lanes. One thing that came out of that input was that we shouldn't have a one-size-fits-all approach for the entire segment of Broadway. It should be customized based on, should be context sensitive, should vary by segment. And then there was consensus that historic brick should only be used where it was originally. So no one was interested in taking historic brick and putting it somewhere it wasn't before. So where we see agreement, if you look in the intersections and the crosswalks, that shows agreement. So we've got, let's see, the medians, there was agreement or there was no disagreement that they should be west of Avenue Q. Everyone agrees that the bike lanes are really not well suited for historic brick, and those should be moved back. So I like to just start with that, and then let's focus on the areas where we don't have full agreement. So the driving lanes, there's difference of opinions there. Historic brick, the CDB TIF said it should not be used. UDHBC said it should be used. Staff said no. The public actually had asphalt and concrete ranked higher than historic brick. On-street parking, we had a similar vote there. And after we evaluated all that information, the consensus of the committee was that the city has taken the time and they've completed the public and stakeholder input, and there is a desire to start to address the needs of Broadway. Our committee's recommendation is that we need to focus on one segment, not all three. We need to focus on one, and we need to acknowledge that it will be costly. So separate those into different components and do one segment well, and the hope is to build support to continue to progress until we get Broadway done. After we tackled Broadway, we often would separate Broadway from the remainder of the projects that were considered, but for the purpose of this overall summary, we did overall evaluate about $300 million worth of identified project needs. So this map shows, if you'll recall, if you watched the last presentation, we gathered a lot of data. There's a lot of, the difference this time is there's even more road work going on now than there was 2 years ago. And so the orange lines represent all of the roadway projects that are in construction, in design, planned, budgeted, in someone's bond. It can be city, it can be county, and it can be state. And the reasoning for that is the traveling public often doesn't differentiate between what the city's doing versus what Lubbock County or TxDOT is doing. They just see cones. And so we put all of those together. We wanted to consider connectivity. We wanted to consider growth needs. A continued focus of this committee, as with the last committee, is that we have a lot of neighborhoods being built around new schools. We know that schools are a major traffic generator, and when you have significant traffic on an underdeveloped street, that can present a safety concern. So safety was really the driving force in all the recommendations that are coming from the CAC today. So that covers a lot of the arterial expansions and the rebuilds. We also, as we did last time, look at neighborhood repairs. The last time there was a big focus on the unpaved roads, and as you all know, there was $5 million allocated towards unpaved roads in the previous bond. Our committee felt like that had helped that program, and we know it's also being funded through other pots of money, and so that was not continued in this set of recommendations. However, we do support neighborhood reconstructions and arterial repairs, and so you'll see that in our recommendations to follow. So as we began to focus on the segment of Broadway from Avenue Q to Avenue E, one of the driving factors was downtown revitalization. That was the reasoning for this segment to be selected as the first project to tackle. You see here a view down Broadway. You can see the Pioneer Building. You can see the future Civic Park area on the left-hand side. The consensus, again, not unanimous, this was a consensus opinion from the committee, is that the road is in very poor condition. The historic brick is 100 years old. We had a member on our committee who actually helped rebuild the intersection in historic brick, and he brought some really good information and experience about what it looks like to actually rebuild a road using historic brick. There were several members who had significant concerns about the viability and longevity. When you talk about maintenance of a brick street, there's no maintenance. There's only pull it out and rebuild it. That's how that is done. And while we have varying lifespans of different paving materials, no one in our committee, and I would venture to say there's very few people who would know what to expect as far as the future lifespan of a 100-year-old building material. So that changes the conversation slightly. We did the math and were able to determine that there is not enough historic brick available for full width for the entire segment. We did that math. Now, there is enough historic brick to be able to do it in focused areas, and we know other cities have utilized it and utilized it very well. We had many strong feelings that historic brick is very important. We also had the acknowledgement that Broadway will be expensive. However, we also had many strong feelings that not everyone is affected by Broadway, and there's other growth needs that need to be considered as well. And so as in 2022, this was very split. There was not a unanimous approval. And so the CAC prioritized the need for an option that will improve the appearance of the corridor, improve the drive quality, be more walkable, and still allow us to meet other needs across the community. So when we started to evaluate what this might look like, we have the benefit of having some recently completed projects that we can look at and help us make that decision. So this is drone imagery from just outside where we sit today. And in that intersection, everything inside the crosswalks, including the crosswalks, is made of brick pavers, so new material. Everything outside of the crosswalk is historic brick. So the thing that our committee liked from this analysis is that from this level, it is difficult to tell a difference. You do get the red brick, and everyone did really, really appreciate that. Now to contrast that with the 13th and Texas intersection, this intersection was rebuilt using historic brick. And from this intersection, that gave us the assumptions that we've carried forward in terms of calculating how much historic brick we have and how much we can expect to get out of that based on the breakage rate of that historic brick. So slightly different appearance, but still the red look. And so with that, the recommendation, we looked, for each of these 6 different areas we considered and looked at options and associated costs for varying all of those. I think we had about 20 different options that we evaluated. We tried to narrow it down, and ultimately the option that the committee voted on to recommend included concrete driving lanes. So this image, this illustration shows concrete in the travel lanes. It's not considered to be stained concrete. I want to make sure everyone's clear on that. It's just concrete. The intersections and the crosswalks in brick pavers. Here, no medians, we just have turn lanes. That would be concrete. And then on-street parking and bike lanes would be concrete. And the costs also include the sidewalk and trees behind back of curb. So that, so I just want to call attention to the cost that's included produces what you see here. As I said, safety was a big consideration of the committee. And I really liked when one of the committee members talked about how when you have red at the intersections only, it almost draws your eyes to something's happening here, especially where we have the park and we want this to be a walkable corridor. It can also, you know, alert the drivers. They need to be aware that there could be something and be more cautious there. So now I'm going to go through the remainder of the projects that are included in the recommendation. University from 50th to the South Loop. This project is in need of a repair and rebuild. The medians make it very difficult for this to be tackled as part of routine project from year to year. And so that was a concern. There's a couple of schools along this corridor. And again, schools as traffic generators, that drove a lot of the prioritization of this project over others. Upland from 98th to 114th Street is included in our recommendations. This project was planned to be part of some TxDOT allocation, and just due to cost escalations, this project had to be removed from there. However, some of the design that's already occurred followed the federal process, and there's some agreements in place that require the city to build this within 10 years or to have to repay the money. So that was one reason this project was prioritized. It also, I don't believe design is complete, but I think it's close to complete, so it could be done relatively quickly. So that is important. And then I'm just going to be pointing out the schools that are next to some of these that drive a lot of the traffic and the growth around them. 34th from Upland to Alcove. This is an arterial expansion. Here, we also, as we did last time, looked at the pavement condition scores. Pavement condition in this area is very poor. We've got significant development. And so we've got several area schools, and so that really drove this project up in the prioritization list. 146th Street from University to Avenue P. As you can see here, we've got development along the corridor and schools in the area, a lot of traffic utilizing unimproved roadways, and so this one was prioritized. Here I've just got a drone image showing what that looks like, and I think your traffic department had some concerns in this area. We've got several people. We've got dirt roads here, and just a lot of traffic on a roadway that cannot handle it. A project that came up that is not an arterial expansion, rather a repair, is Quaker from 4th to 19th Street. I'm sure that you all are aware there's been significant utility projects along this corridor. And so there are some, pavement condition challenges. The other thing that brought this up to the top is there is a desire in the committee's recommendation to look at adding a traffic signal. I can't recall the numbers right now. I can get those to you later, but the number of cars that leave at the same time from the Greek Circle area presents a safety concern. And that, from what I understand, that Greek Circle area is planned for expansion. So those numbers are set to double in the coming years. So that was one reason that this project rose up to the top. 146th Street from Slide to Quaker. This is an arterial expansion. This one is a little bit different from some of the others. You don't see a ton of rooftops right off of that roadway. To the bottom, there's the golf course just to the south, but beneath that on the aerial is Liberty High School. And This is a key corridor for just emergency access to the rest of the city. And based on where it sits, you can kind of see the terracing of the field there. There's a subdivision just off the map to the north, and all that drainage is discharged in a concentrated location. That combined with the slope make this road impassable when it becomes wet. So it gets wet, it stays wet, you can't pass it, and I think that presents some emergency access concerns. So that was really the driver in getting this project in the list. Avenue P from 130th to 146th Street. This one, it's clear just how much development there is right there. This one is a little bit unique. It is at the city limits, and so our recommendation is a 2-lane roadway, not the traditional 3-lane or 5-lane, and that I'm about to go into. Our committee felt strongly that any roadway recommended by our group needs to be within the city limits, that it's beyond the scope of the city of Lubbock to recommend projects that are outside the city limits. And so what I wanted to call your attention to here is, recently the city and county jointly completed the Indiana project, and I've got that shown in orange. And so as we looked at a lot of these projects, it seems logical to kind of radiate out, not to play leapfrog and go out 2 miles and come back. However, there are some critical corridors, including University from 130th to 146th Street from University to Indiana, and Quaker Avenue from 146th Street south to Woodrow. Although these projects were identified as needs and they make sense from a traffic generation perspective, half or more of that project is located outside the city limits. And so our committee did not feel comfortable recommending those for improvements. And so we will have a recommendation associated with that at the end. One of the projects that was on the list was Alcove from 50th to 66th Street. When it came time to look at the dollars included in this, our committee felt that there had to be a line. We couldn't recommend every project that we felt was needed. But during the course of the conversations, we talked about if you have the ability to build out the full intersection, even if the travel lanes are not at full width, it can still operate better and provide some safety and benefit. And so we are recommending an improvement of the 50th and Alcove intersection. So want to make sure that's clear. We're not recommending for Alcove to be part of the improvements, just that intersection. And then in the 2022 bond, our committee recommended and the city chose to move forward the Dunbar Manhattan Heights neighborhood rebuild project. Our committee wants to recommend South Overton for a similar effort. And so we've designated $2 million. That hasn't been defined, so it's not a specific area within South Overton. I think that would need to be defined later down the road. But that is part of our recommendations as well. So overall, the CAC recommends, we've identified these priority growth-driven projects with safety being the driver for all of them. Our recommendation is for a November 2024 bond election, the single proposition with $110 million for the recommended projects. We support council's focus on evaluating this every few years. And really, we know that the identified needs still remain. They still exceed what we feel comfortable recommending. And so we tried to put together a list that could get us through the next 5 years. Additionally, the CAC recommends that a privately funded PAC should be formed to help promote the bond, that the city should pursue annexation to provide connectivity along those priority corridors that I identified. And we also hope that the city will continue and consider increasing cash appropriation for street maintenance. One thing that we saw was that we've got the neighborhoods and we've also got these arterials. So all the arterials inside the loop, in the older segments of town, they already have enough lanes to carry the traffic that are needed. But they are projects that do need some attention. And so our hope is that maybe there can be a focus on how to tackle those arterial rebuilds through that program. Regarding Broadway, the CAC recommends, our view is that the city has completed that public and stakeholder input needed for Broadway, and it is time to begin addressing the Broadway needs. Our recommended design includes brick paver intersections and concrete elsewhere, with safety being a consideration in the selected alternative. We believe that all historic brick that is removed from Broadway should be cleaned, palletized, and given to the city of Lubbock for a future application. In our opinion, that would be the segment from University to Avenue Q where you have historic design guidelines. We do, however, we gave a number here. If council opts to swap out the brick pavers for historic brick in the intersections, we've allocated an additional, or we would recommend you add additional $3 million cost for that. And that we also recommend the city move forward with utility relocations for Broadway. So what I've got here is just a summary of all the projects that were considered, all the projects that are planned or underway, the schools, and then the recommended projects are shown in yellow. And then I've got that map simplified where you can just see a breakdown of where those recommended projects exist. And then I'll close with, here is the table of the recommended projects. We've noted where there's a school, we've noted the roadway and the limits of the recommendation, the district that project lies in, the number of lanes we're recommending. You'll notice that that cell is blank where we are not proposing an expansion, rather a reconstruction. And so the total of those make up that $110 million recommendation. That concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Keister? Dr. Wilson?
Not really a question, Heather. I just want to tell you guys, thank you to the bond committee, to you for chairing 2 times in a row. I know that is a significant burden on you to be able to do that, to everybody that has served on the previous bond committee, on this bond committee. And just to say that, I think we heard earlier in citizen comments that people have thought that this was too fast, especially with Broadway. And this goes well beyond your time on this committee, my time sitting in this seat, anybody sitting up here. The can has been kicked down the road many times on Broadway. And I thank you guys for your recommendation that it's actually time to move forward and try to do something about it. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Just like the last bond, I was not happy. I'm not going to lie and say I'm happy because I feel like District 1 is still not getting enough. My concern, as usual, you mentioned like some of the work that's been done with the maintenance. The thing is that these aging neighborhoods had not, in my district, had not had street maintenance in 30 to 40 years. And that's not acceptable. And I know y'all worked hard, and I appreciate it. I know there's a lot of concerns from some folks. The brick thing was before, and so that was a little bit of a surprise to me. But driving down Broadway, I've driven it multiple times. There's a problem. Whether you like it or not, there is a problem on this street, and it's hard, because I've had people say it's not being utilized. Part of the problem, or the reason that it's not being utilized, is because people don't want to drive on it because it's in such poor shape. But I appreciate the bricks. The bricks are beautiful and unique, but I've heard all the feedback. There is a problem with that street, and I don't know what we can do to fix it other than start making changes. And so on that note, as hard as it is to see some of the changes and accept some of the recommendations, it is necessary. It is necessary and it has to be done. One thing, in the last bond, how much money did District 2 get for that neighborhood rebuild? Was it 4 million?
5, I
5
believe.
million? And you're proposing for this bond for District 1, how much are we proposing, 2 million?
2 million, yes, ma'am.
So we're short 3 million? Because in that neighborhood that we're looking at in South Overton, I will take anybody on a ride so they can get to see it. There are some very serious concerns. I have intersections that have been neglected. I have brick streets that have been patched. There are so many needs, and why 2 million is sufficient when it wasn't sufficient in another area because it had been neglected as well, I don't see how that's equitable. And I want to be so supportive. I want to be a team player. I was a team player last time, but we have to address this, and I'm not going to get another chance. That's why, as hard as it is for me to face you and tell you this, that's why I'm sitting up here, so that I can tell you. I don't feel like this is fair to this area. And then something else that, stands out to me. I know for some folks, we have had a lot of issues with the arterial and making sure that we're getting stuff done inside. And I think we're making things happen inside. I appreciate that. As far as, I need to know if in that 2 million, what is the clarification? Do we have one? I've asked multiple times, what exactly are we doing with 2 million? Because from what I understand, we can't do a lot.
We as a committee did not define what would be done. We just allocated money to then later be defined.
So if I vote yes for this, and I don't know exactly what I'm getting in my district. I know the last bond I got half a mile, and it wasn't a lot. I just feel like we're not getting enough. We're just not getting enough. Carmona Elementary is one of the streets in my districts that went, if we were talking about safety, that has been, finally, but that was because of street maintenance dollars, and there was no rebuild, even though that street was not looking really good. Do we have the other Broadway slides, or just this one?
In this presentation, just this one, but I have that and I'd be happy to share it with you.
I'd like to see that because I really haven't really gotten to see that. I mean,
Sure.
I think maybe during the time that we had the town hall, I probably saw, but I never actually got a copy. So I'd like to just look at it one more time. And then, I hear the concerns of folks with the bricks, and I get the UDC, I get the concern with transparency. I don't know how to fix that. I mean, we get agendas on a Friday and we're expected to make decisions on a Tuesday. And that's what's always hard about this. I do feel that I need to express that any of the road bond projects that we do need to be in the city limits. I want to make sure that we reinforce that. We've already seen, and no offense to the county, but they have pulled projects that have not been completed, and I don't think it's fair to our citizens in the city of Lubbock to have to fix what was committed by another jurisdiction. So for now, I'm going to take a break, but I just want you to know that I want to be excited and everything. I'm excited because I feel like we're making progress, and I just want for the clarification to the public is that I realize it seems rushed, but how many hours did y'all put all together?
12
And that was
in meetings,
Yeah,
plus.
so there was 3-hour meetings, so normally a meeting is about an hour long. So you did double time. And then the reason that we are also trying to complete this and review this is because we want to try to correlate with the November election. And then I heard someone comment that people weren't invited back. There was no guarantees. We have an all-new council, and that was up to the council. I know I had 2 new folks that represented, and you didn't have to have people from your district representing. That's the other thing on this committee. Is that correct?
That's correct. I actually asked that question because I noticed there were people, that were representing a district where they don't live, and so I asked that question.
And then, in defense of some of the new council members came in, and there was such a quick turnaround, and they were expected to make recommendations of folks to sit on this committee. And I think they had 1 meeting, and then that was requested of them, and there wasn't a lot of time. So it does feel pressed, but I see the necessity of it also because we're trying to make sure that we meet all the deadlines. But again, I appreciate what you guys did. I do wish there would have been a more, and I know that you're trying to address the growing needs of the growing neighborhoods, but don't overlook the aging neighborhoods. Even though we're established, our roads are established, our roads are a lot of them are in very poor shape. And so I just have to say that because if I don't, then I'm going to go to bed and I'm going to be thinking, man, I should have told her what I really felt. So now you know.
I appreciate your comments, and I understand and I share your concern. Our committee didn't feel that street maintenance should be bonded, which is why there is that discrepancy in the recommendations. And I will tell you that when we took the final vote, you always want to feel great and feel like you had a win. Every person had to give on something they wanted to come up with the final recommendations. And I was actually really, just honored to be in a group of people who care about the community as a whole and are willing to give on some of their personal desires for the good of the all. And I know that's not a consolation, but I just want you to know that I hear and I appreciate your comments.
Because once again, you said some, I feel like I gave up again more than others. So I just want equity. We've got to have equity, even in streets, because that's what we're all about. That's what city government is.
Mr. Glasheen.
Ma'am, first of all, I want to say thank you to you and everybody who served on the committee and being willing to serve the city with your time and your talent with that. I represent District 3, and there aren't any proposals for spending in District 3, and I want to say I think that's appropriate. I think that our needs are different, that we need maintenance. We don't need large bonded projects. I think that you mentioned something similar along those lines. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the committee's philosophy on what's appropriate for a large road bond versus the routine maintenance that we're discussing as part of our annual budget cycle?
Absolutely. So when Public Works brings a street maintenance budget to you guys, there's different approaches, different treatments for roadways that are used to extend the life of an existing street. And the lifespan of those, the committee's opinion is the lifespan of whatever we're doing needs to exceed the length of the time that the money is going to be borrowed. And so for that reason, we know and we applaud the focus on cash funding street maintenance. We feel like that is appropriate. However, it makes it very difficult when you start to compare projects. One thing we didn't do was add up how much money and where it's being spent on those projects. You've got street maintenance, you've got the unpaved roads, you've got CDBG funding, you've got various pots of money that are being spent for different types of construction. And so what we did was identify areas where we can do a rebuild. within this, and that would be a more appropriate use of the bonded funds. I hope that answers your question.
That does, thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Harris?
Yes, just like everyone has, excuse me, has said, thank you for your efforts. But with me being the new kid on the block, I'm kind of in agreement with Mr. Hernandez, like he said. You know, I didn't have enough representation for District 2. And if there was some way that the council could go back, I mean, because this is for the people. So, and we didn't basically really have the proper representation that the people that wanted to, and I didn't know, I asked a couple of people, but they was unavailable. But just like Ms. Martinez said, you know, we're focused out there on the new stuff, which they needed. But we have old stuff too, like in District 2, that we need to take care of. I mean, you know, you got people that's been in this town over 70 years and they're pay tax dollars as well. So I would just like for us to, if it's able to, I don't know the rules and regulations of everything, but I would like to have it revisited. I would like the opportunity and the chance for me to get somebody on there that can speak up for District 2, because I'm the new kid on the block. So, and we didn't have proper representation. So that's all I'm saying. You did a good job. I'm in agreement with you as far as the bricks goes. I'm sitting there thinking, running through my mind, that we got a couple of streets and some of these bricks that are on some of these off streets can go, you know, and the way you had it laid out, it looks good, you know, because majority of us people that are in here now, we're not going to be here 50 years from now. You know, we got to make sure that this city is looking good and still, you know, thriving. And the way you had it laid out, it looks pretty good. So I would just like for, if the opportunity could be, I don't know the procedures to go through, but like I say, it was just put on me right here at the last minute. And I would like some representation for somebody with some ideas and ideals. And I'm to look at what do District 2 need that can apply to this bond that we're doing here. Because I know we need repairs. I know we need maintenance. And so that's all I'm saying. I mean, it's good that we're growing, but we need things as well. So, but thank you for what you've done. Appreciate you.
Thanks for the feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And just to your comments, Mr. Harris, of course, we will have opportunity to discuss this as a council. I mean, this is just coming to us as their proposal, but we will have plenty of opportunities, you know, to talk about what the final presentation to our voters is going to be. So there'll still be opportunities for that, just to make sure you understand that. This is not the final thing. We have the final say on it.
I am not the decision maker, yes.
Okay, Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you to all of your committee for the hours that you've spent. Was there anyone on the committee who's directly involved in road construction?
Yes, multiple people.
And so and my question for them is, how do we feel about the bidding participation? We're $100 million into a $200 million bond, and if we stack another 100 into the marketplace, did they feel like that we had the capacity from our contracting community to manage this much work? Because that's always a concern, is being overworked, and you see some escalation in pricing, maybe you see some quality go down, or you lack participation, which is also a part of our challenge.
That's a great question, something I neglected to cover, so I'm glad you brought it up. I think originally we were looking at about a 3-year process. We did look at our local contracting community, and our recommendation would be to make this a 5-year process to help balance, you know, the projects over the duration, so that we get competition for these projects and keep the costs in line. So absolutely, that was a consideration.
So did we talk any at all about, and we talked as a council early about trying to do this on a more consistent basis so that we're not having such large bond issues all at one time or going for so many years. I think, Mr. Atkinson, we went 12 years without a bond package.
I think it was 13.
13 to 16, 15 plus years without a road bond package. And so is there, and this gives us a number, we're 300 million over the course of 8 or 9 years, maybe 10 years. You know, I wonder sometimes if maybe we shouldn't try to do 40, 50 million dollars, $60 million every other year so that we get into this cycle of continuous work so that it's not so overwhelming, A, to the public and the tax burden, but also to the construction industry also. Did y'all talk about that at all?
We did, and we wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying. Our impression when looking at the project list is that we just got behind and that the 2022 bond didn't get us caught up. And so that's why we're recommending another bond. There are a lot of people who are uneasy about that. You know, we recognize the unknowns about our economy, and so that was a consideration. We wholeheartedly support. We felt about a 5-year window is a good window to use, and that allows you to keep these dollars lower where they're a little bit more palatable. However, the desire to tackle Broadway made that number very difficult. So I don't know that I've fully articulated this. There were a lot of competing priorities here. And so we were really trying to find our way through that and give the best recommendation, knowing that no one is completely happy with the outcome. We're hoping that the community can support it. We feel there's schools with 900 kids where there's a dirt road going to it, and we felt that that was unacceptable. And so that was really what drove that, if you want to call it an inequity in the district representation of the projects. And so, yes, everything you said we agree with and we discussed at length.
Well, thank you again. It sounds to me like you've been very thorough in your conversations. And again, I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Mr. Rose.
I think Jennifer was first.
Mr. Rose.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank y'all for everything that you did. So I guess just for everyone to know, I know it wasn't a unanimous decision, but I guess you guys mostly had agreement on not full brick throughout Broadway. Can you kind of explain why y'all came to that decision and how you came to it?
Yes, we really looked at all the variables and put costs next to that.
Mm-hmm.
This segment of Broadway, full brick, would be $48 million.
$48 million.
$48 million for Avenue Q to Avenue E.
So that wouldn't be, that's just from Avenue Q to E, right?
Correct.
Not the full thing. So 48 million, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And it would raid our historic brick stockpile to the point where it made a lot of people uncomfortable. We wouldn't have the historic brick to address the needs where it would be needed. So we felt that looking at the recommendations, the CDB TIF, opted to recommend asphalt or concrete in this segment. There was a lot of consideration for that.
So you would say cost
was a consideration, a big consideration, because for every person who wants to preserve the history, and for the record, I appreciate a robust historic downtown. I do. I also believe it can be done multiple ways. If it's done well, you can still get a feel for it. And so I know not everyone shares that opinion, but cost was a consideration. The longevity of the life, we felt like this is such a big project. If we do it, we need to do it, and it needs to be done well. If we move forward and we build an historic brick and the brick falls apart and we have to come back and do it, that seemed like a big red flag to us. That our feeling, just like not wanting to bond street maintenance, is we need whatever materials are used to surpass the length of the bond and to perform well.
And forgive me, so 48 million that would be for new new bricks, this is using the historic brick.
This would be using historic
So
brick.
repurposing it, I guess?
Right, you would pull it up, clean it, palletize it, so then you could then rebuild it as the intersection I showed you was rebuilt.
Right. And so that was some of your concern, that there wouldn't be enough to go around to,
Right, based on our calculations and the loss rate of that intersection, we would have to access half of the estimated stockpile to get enough to build what we were proposing to build at a cost of $48 million. Or there were various, when we took away the bike lanes and the on-street parking, it ranged from $30 million to 48, just depending on the option that was selected. And ultimately, the cost was a big consideration, the lifespan of the material, and then our ability to meet other glaring needs was the other piece of the equation.
thank you. That's all I have.
Dr. Wilson.
Heather, I'd just like to, I like how you have described that these big bond projects aren't meant for maintenance. And I do appreciate you even put a little bit of maintenance in here, even though that's not what they're meant for. And, we've had a couple of members up here talk about that things are not equitable. I can only imagine 40 years ago that people on the south side, the west side, southeast side of Lubbock, as Indiana inside the loop was widened, and 50th were widened, and 34th were widened, they probably also felt that was inequitable. So I think that's not a great way to look at things. I mean, I hear every day, how come District 5 and District 4 and District 6 didn't get a splash pad? And that's not the way we look at it. I have to reassure them that they were placed in the best possible location for all of our citizens. And so right now in District 1, we're seeing TxDOT, although slowly, redoing Avenue Q and Avenue 19 and 19th Street. And it looks wonderful in front of Tech, which I believe is Councilman Glasheen's district in District 3. So sometimes we can't think of things as everybody's going to get an equal share of the pie, because there doesn't need to be a pie. We are all one city. We are all citizens of the same city, and the city grows at different rates. 40 years ago, we were growing tremendously inside the loop, and now we are tasked to maintain that. And now we're growing tremendously in the southeast, southwest, northwest, and that's where growth has decided to go. None of us up here control growth, and I think we all can agree on that. And we always try to make sure things go in one area or the other, but I just encourage all of us to think as we are all equal up here together as citizens of Lubbock, and not always trying to grab at pieces of the pie. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Jennifer, DC. I love Jennifer, and I appreciate her. If I didn't say thank you, did I say thank you?
You did. No, I appreciate your comment, so don't worry.
I just have to reinforce that I know this is not an easy thing, and I appreciate it. And, Jennifer's right. We have to work as a community, but I think when you just go without so many times, that's why it's easy for me to just say, you know what, you left us out again, or you didn't give us enough. And, with this past year, we did get funding for street maintenance in the Jackson neighborhood, because I think someone mentioned that we didn't, but we did. And you can see the significance. But I really want us, just moving back, maybe we can carve out from another area and bring it to South Overton, because even though we think it's just maintenance, there is clearly, and I took Eric Rahino on we went on a little drive yesterday, and it's clearly, if we don't maintain these streets because we don't have enough money to do that, then what happens is we do have to rebuild them, and it ends up costing more. And I think South Overton in some areas is now in the rebuild process. And I learned the process. That was one of the first things that Wood Franklin, who does an amazing job in his area, he went through and showed me how if we don't maintain regularly, it's going to cost us more. And he showed everything. And this particular neighborhood, we're there. Mm-hmm. So it will be our next Broadway. It already is. So, we just have to have a little bit more in that particular neighborhood, because it is there is a lot of traffic in that neighborhood as well. So if we can just carve out, I will be supportive so that all our city gets some change and updates. So just to share that with you and the rest of my colleagues. And I appreciate it again if I didn't say that.
No, you did.
Thank you.
Just to acknowledge, we share your belief in that. And back to our original charge was to study the need for roadway construction or repair. I know this table will be the takeaway. However, one of our recommendations is to continue in that effort and to give focus on those existing streets. So we agree with you. The committee's feeling was that the bond was not the appropriate place for that. And so that's why it was represented the way it was.
I beg to differ a little bit, and I
Understand.
will. Do you want to do a field trip? Because I'll go and drive
I'll
you
go
to
with
South
you.
Overton.
I'll go with you any day.
Thank you.
Mr. Rose.
Sorry, I had a couple more questions. Was there any streets in South Overton on the table to bond, not just for maintenance?
I actually received emails from multiple citizens with specific locations. I don't recall the name of those right now, but I passed those along to staff because I thought they were good feedback and probably should be considered if this moves forward and if the bond passes, that money, they should be considered for appropriation for those funds.
And then, speaking of growth inside the loop, 50th, or University from 50th to the South Loop, you mentioned the medians make it difficult. Is the plan, your recommended plan, is it to keep those, or how did that shake out for you guys?
The cost includes fixing those and repurposing them. We, of course, didn't get into a detailed design of what that could be. We wanted to make sure that there was dollars there so that it could be accomplished.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I just want to point out that now between Avenue Q and on 19th Street in front of Lubbock High School, we're about to see more destruction of that street. And that is going to increase the traffic into South Overton. So another reason that, those streets have so much wear and tear, and now they're going to get double duty on it. So I just wanted to point that out.
Mr. Collins.
And I think you probably answered this, but remind me, on the Broadway project, in the intersections where you were showing the red brick, are we reutilizing the historic pavers there, or are we using new brick there?
The recommendation included in this table is brick pavers. However, I did provide a cost, that $3 million difference, to swap the brick pavers for the historic brick, if you choose.
Okay, do you think that and I think I understand we get about a 40 to 50% retention rate, so we would still gain some in our paver stockpile and still be able to do that with the $3 million additional cost?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I have a few questions, and thank you for everybody's comments, which have all been very good. I appreciate all your work, and I know, haven't been on the council for a while, you can hardly ever get unanimous agreement on anything. So you just have to move forward at some point. You have to make a decision, move forward, and ultimately it'll be the citizens' decision what they want to do with this. So that's one reason I feel very confident about whatever we move forward. It's up to the citizens at the end of the day what they want, and they will make the decision. I got a couple of questions, though. Let me make one comment first. I agree with you that most of what needs to be done in terms of South Overton and other places, even in my district or where I live and represented, a lot of that street maintenance, and I applaud our city manager for his commitment to increasing that street maintenance budget, and that's how we're going to be able to take care of these things going forward through our commitment to that, because we all realize that we can't neglect the older areas of our town. And to the extent we do that, we buy bigger problems for ourselves. So I appreciate the fact that you put some in here, but this is not the end of what we will be doing, I think, in different areas of our town. But two areas, and Mr. Rose kind of commented on University from 50th to Loop 289. That's probably one of the strangest streets in Lubbock, and I'm not sure who designed that and what they were thinking when they designed it. But is it going to still have pretty much the same layout it has with the what I call access lanes on either side? And I just don't know what to do about that street. What is y'all's plan? Could you describe that a little bit more?
We looked, of course, any significant change to that impacts drainage. It could domino into a lot of things. So what we have in the cost is a consolidation of those concrete islands, some realignment so that they maybe make a little bit more sense, and then just enough quantity in there so there's some freedom to make design decisions that can make this corridor look and work better than it currently does.
But I also noticed that you do have an asterisk there, and I'm trying to think of what schools really are along 50th Street. I think Trinity School is on it. Any other schools you
There
identified?
was another school, I can't remember right now. Yes.
Bayless to one
Yes.
side, a couple of blocks.
That's right.
And I think, it probably does get used somewhat, but Avenue U is probably the primary way to get there. So a lot of this is, I don't want to say cosmetic, but it's not fundamentally a rebuilding
It's
of the
not
street itself.
correct.
The street carries the traffic as it is, right?
It is. It's not a reworking of the base. It's
Right.
everything else, which is still,
On
it's
top of
still
the base.
not a normal street maintenance project. It's more significant than that.
But that is a little bit more than $7 million
Yes.
out of this whole.
It
It's a
is.
significant amount of money.
It is.
For something that's not really a street problem, it's more a design or a aesthetic. So I do
The-
have a little concerns about that amount, because I'm always concerned about trying to keep this dollar amount to a number that I think our voters are going to be willing to vote for. So my other area of concern was Quaker from 4th to 19th. Now, I know it's a bad street at the moment because of all the construction that's going on under the street. What is your plan for that? Could you describe that a little bit more fully to me, other than just the street light? And the street light, of course, wouldn't be part of this, but you're planning for a street light at some, but what else are you thinking about for
Correct.
Quaker?
It would be similar to University, that it would be a milling of that pavement surface, not reworking the base, but a new pavement surface. There's also, I know some of the concerns that we tried to separate are where the city and the state right-of-way come together. There's a dip in the pavement that bothers a lot of people, and that's not completely the city's issue to fix either. And so I think there's some opportunities for refinement in that one as well. We tried to separate it out and keep the city issue, and just educate, what was beyond the scope of that. But it would be similar. Do you want to speak to it, or?
Anybody else have any comments on that? Because I really would like a little bit more clarity on what's being proposed for both of those, but.
Yeah, so on the Quaker, everybody's familiar with the paving cuts that have occurred. We've had a lot of the new gas installed, new fiber optic installed. We have a couple new water lines and some new development that require utility extensions. So that road has a lot of patching. The base is in good condition. The roadway surface is patched, and that can create water intrusion in the road that could damage that base and damage that road. So both University and Quaker are being proposed as a street rebuild. So it would be milling that asphalt off and putting a brand new asphalt road on top of it. So basically utilizing the base that's there, but rebuilding the asphalt portion of those streets and getting a new street in place.
Okay, so asphalt rebuild on University as well. I
Correct.
thought that was just the
Both of
median
them.
stuff, but it's
Yes, it's
total.
Yeah, the medians are included, but the majority of what we're doing, both of those streets are starting to see failure, and if they fail too far, that goes in the base. then we're talking about a full street rebuild, and we want to catch that before that occurs.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Keister. Appreciate it. All right. So do I have a motion to accept this Citizens Advisory? Thank you. So I will entertain a motion.
Second.
Who's the motion ahead? Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins made the motion. Mayor Pro Tem seconded. Any discussion, any further discussion at this point? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the proposal from the Citizens Advisory Committee, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. There is none. It passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We'll take a short break here for about 10 minutes. We're back. Now we're going to move forward with our work session, in continuation of our discussion from yesterday. And I'm going to call on Mr. Atkinson to tell us where we're going to be picking up and tell us where we need to turn in our little books to follow along. Mr. Atkinson?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. You are very, very close to the end. So if you would turn to page 94 in the books, page 94. This is actually the last component unit budget that you have to do, so this will be for Civic Love. And we have Ms. Key and Mr. Carr here today. We're going to turn it over to them.
Good afternoon, my name is Roger Carr, and I'm here to speak to you on behalf of the 24-25 Civic Love budget. The board has prepared and approved the balanced operational budget for 24-25. The budget reflects the revenues and expenses related to the concessions, catering, and ticketing operation. These revenue streams go toward fulfilling CLI's projects. The budget includes additional marketing dollars to develop and implement strategies to increase brand awareness and further promote CLI's projects. We do tend to budget revenues conservatively since the majority of our revenues are event-driven, and those events are scheduled by venues that utilize our services. A few highlights of our budget include dollars for marketing CLI's brand and our projects. A few highlights of the operational budget include Civic Love's local grant program. This grant program funds arts and entertainment events presented by local nonprofit organizations that utilize the Civic Center and Moonlight Musicals Amphitheater. Revenues from the food, beverage, and ticketing operation in these facilities help fund this grant program. We're pleased that we were able to increase the amount allocated for the local grant program for 24-25. The continuation of producing our annual Love It Music Now album. The project began in 2016. The 2025 album will be released in late January, just prior to the airing of the 25 LMN TV special. Work will start on the 2026 album in late spring of 2025 with fundraising efforts and promoting song submissions. The West Texas Walk of Fame inductions planned for October 3rd, 24 in the Civic Center Theater. Inductees this year are singer Gerald Dolter, visual artist Tina Fuentes, musician Steve Metter, visual artist James Watkins, and we hope that you'll be able to join us as we celebrate all of these talented artists and events. And that, my friends, is what we have.
Are there any questions? Okay, Mr. Atkinson? Dr. Wilson?
Quick question for you guys, and this may be for Jared as well. Back on our HOT fund, it said to Civic Lubbock, we were given $574,356 back on page 84. I'm trying to, where is that in this revenue? Because that number doesn't equal.
It's going to be in the other income line item, so on the left side of that chart, and then they have some miscellaneous income that's on top of that.
So that's where it's at?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that Hot Tux fund, is that not correct?
No.
this budget is strictly the operational budget for Civic Lubbock. The hotel occupancy tax is budgeted under a hotel occupancy tax
Okay, my mistake.
And the reason why we don't include it in our operational budget is we don't use that for any of our projects or for anything that funds the Civic Lubbock Corporation. 100% of those funds go to the Cultural Art Grant Program, the Public Art Program, and live music at the airport, which are included in our agreement with the city. And so those funds are put in a separate money market accounts. They are not commingled with our CLI money. They do not fund any of our CLI projects. And we recognize, those stay in that market account until they are paid out. So we recognize them as the money is paid. So they offset each other when they're finally put in. You'll see that in the prior budgets. It will show it because those are monies that were actually paid out and recognize the revenue and the expense at that time.
So I'm slightly confused, Mr. Atkinson. If we have it on we have a paid out, but know where that it goes to in our line item on a budget?
Hang on just a second. Lauren, could I get you to switch over to my display? Thank you. So council member called out the 574,356. That is here in the hotel occupancy fund. And then if I understood correctly, it does not repeat in their operating budget.
Correct.
There's
Right.
straight income there. So Vicki, can you go back over how you recognize and then pay out that revenue?
Okay, so we received the money last year for the 2025 grant program. So we get it and then we grant it out the next year so that we know how much we have to grant out. So that stays in kind of a money market. It stays on our balance sheet basically, but we don't recognize it as an expense and a revenue until grant funds are actually paid out to the grantees.
But you wouldn't recognize it as an income coming in, even if you're holding it year over year to the?
No, it's in the fund balance. I mean, not on our fund balance. It's in the deferred revenue
So
where it's kept.
maybe it's on your balance sheet.
Yes,
So you do show it as received.
we show it as deferred revenue.
Okay.
We sure do. And then it comes over to the actual, like, financials once grants are paid. And so we bring over the revenue, and then we also have that expense that offsets it.
But it does leave the city. Once it's made, it's
Leaves
off
in-
our book.
Magically go somewhere off of this book and then reappear somewhere.
To
It
their
goes to our
account.
deferred revenue in our balance sheet.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Glasheen.
Sorry.
How many months are you holding the hot money before you release it in the grants?
We used to get it in the year that we granted it out. Well, years ago, we got it one year, granted it out the next. Then they changed the way that we were receiving it, and they gave us the budgeted allocation, and we granted it out that same fiscal year. And of course, the grant program is kind of not on a fiscal year, but we still showed it in that year in terms of interest that we earn and that sort of thing that goes into deferred as well. Okay, I lost my train of thought, I'm sorry.
My question was, how long are you holding the hot
Okay,
money
so
before you
now
release it in grants?
We're getting it monthly, and so what we get this year, it's probably about a year and a half that we'll have that in from the beginning to when we actually award grants.
You're holding the money for a year and a half before awarding it?
Some of it, since it's only doing monthly, like if we started getting it in October, we'll get it monthly for this fiscal year, and then we will grant it out the next June.
Who's receiving the interest on those amounts that you're
It
holding?
goes right back into the grant program. So we include that in terms of the total amount that we have available to grant out.
Why don't you award the grants as the funds become available instead of waiting up to 18 months?
We only take applications once a year.
But what's the reasoning behind that? If you have money coming in continuously, why only distribute it every 12 to 18 months.
Okay, so I don't know how to best explain it. We do our grant applications, they're due like June 1 each year. And we want to be sure that we know exactly how much we have to grant out. And so, used to when we got the true up, we didn't get the true up until like maybe January, February. So then we knew exactly how much we had to grant out then that June. So we just want to be sure we know exactly how much we have to grant out so we don't end up with a problem of not having enough.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Mayor Pro Tem.
It's like a piggy bank. When you get the hot tax, you're putting a little bit in. If we know our goal is $100 and we're getting $20 or, over a year, you're getting just a little bit each month.
Mm-hmm.
I know because I've applied for that grant. And once your money's there, because, I know Mr. Glasheen or Councilman Glasheen spoke the other day and mentioned $30,000. That's what a certain group applied for, but that's not what we gave them, and we still didn't know how much money was actually in there. Then we were able to provide them. Is that correct?
Okay.
More or less.
I kind of lost you.
That's my interpretation, is that money isn't just like a guarantee. You're given all this.
No, not at all.
You're given in increments, and then once it builds up, then we know people make requests, but then the organizations are given based on how much you have and.
Right. It's divvied out, and we try to grant out 100% every year. And so we add the interest that was earned. I usually cut the interest off at March. And so from the time we had that particular, we keep each grant allocation in a separate money market so that we know exactly how much we have for that particular year that is coming up for the grant awards. So, yeah, it's just, we got in one time where maybe the allocation didn't come in as budgeted. And so, we were doing 2 cycles at that time. And so we were like, we had kind of over promised. And so what we did was we just deducted that amount from next year's allocation so that we wouldn't have to go back and say, oops. Oh, good, you sure can.
Okay, so this year we budgeted an actual dollar amount, so they knew what they had, and they probably could have changed the way they granted it out. But in years prior, it was a percentage. So the city gave a percentage to the program, not knowing how much money they would actually get. So years ago, they estimated based off that percentage, and the money came in lower. So they did not get enough money, and we had to return funds. So there's like a history that's kind of happened. So they were granting money years and years ago based on an amount that they didn't have yet. So they backed it up so that they were positive how much money they were going to have. Have I made it worse? Or is it a little more clear? So this year, they budgeted a specific dollar amount. So moving forward, they could grant based on a specific dollar amount, not a percentage. Because they were getting a percentage. That's the true up that you hear about sometimes. So they were getting a percentage of the dollars, not knowing exactly how much they had to grant out. Did that help?
Yes.
Cheryl, you would send the true up at the end. So to answer your question, they could potentially change the program now, and knowing how much money they're going to get, a flat dollar amount, they could do more than one cycle. You could divide it up. You could do half at one time and half at another. When do y'all transfer the funding?
We're just getting it monthly.
You're getting it monthly now?
Yeah. We used to get it in one lump sum.
Yeah, it used to be one lump
Yeah,
sum.
one lump sum. But now it's monthly, so yeah, we don't know
Gotcha.
how much, yeah, for
So
sure.
that probably changed.
Because it's even
fiscal
with
year?
the monthly, it's got a cap on it. So if
Yeah.
it comes in under that, then that's what we get, is whatever's under it.
Got it.
Yeah. So it's just, we've just found that in our grant programs, it's just better to know exactly what you
How
have.
much you
have it in hand before you grant it out. It's just a good practice.
Vicki, how many years have you been doing this?
What?
2006.
18.
But you've been
For
a
the grant
part,
program, yes.
yeah, for the grant program, but you've been a part of this for
52 years. yeah.
52 years.
I've been associated with Civic Lubbock in one form or fashion for 52 years, yeah.
Thank you for your constant work. And I know that it's not easy. We make it think, or we may believe that it's easy, but it is not an easy process.
But it's a fun process.
But it's a
though.
fun process.
It's fun, yeah.
Thank you, Vicki.
Thank you. Anything else?
Mr. Collins.
I think having a little bit of experience at this, it might be helpful to point out that oftentimes these nonprofit organizations are trying to build their annual budgets.
Right.
And so they make their grant request to help fill their annual operating budgets. And so it's
the
helpful,
projects, yes.
it's helpful for them to understand that there's one-time ask and that it's done. It also is helpful for you to not have intermediate ask or asks that come randomly to you so that you don't have to, make a decision on the fly. It's so much easier to plan this and do it once. This grant program also has a very significant look back. If I'm not mistaken, you examine every grant to ensure that the monies were used as they were requested and for the product or the event that the purpose. So it really makes a lot of sense, and this is very common in the industry to do an annual request to receive a fixed amount of funding based on the request. And I think I noticed throughout all of the requests that you awarded a couple of weeks ago, almost all of them were less than their ask.
A lot of them were. There were some that did get 100%, but they were the lower level grant requests. And I will say that when we had two cycles, it was a June 1 cycle and a December 1 cycle. And so the June 1 covered events from it was for 6 months. And then the next cycle covered the next 6 months. And when we hit COVID, of course, we had to go a year without a grant program. And we just reevaluated that and decided it might be a good idea to do a once a year, because that's what a lot of the other foundations do. And that way, people will know for their particular project, like you say, they may not know, they need to have enough time to plan their projects as well. But that way, they know earlier, like Cycle 2 people know earlier that they're going to have funds than having to wait until right before, their projects start in March, say, and they don't know anything until January, whether or not they have funds. So while they need to plan a little earlier, I think it's really nice that they get to know, way more in advance that they're going to have funding.
Right. Thank you.
Dr. Wilson.
Yeah, either Vicki or Jared, so after the money has been given out, is it accounted for in this budget sheet anywhere? In the older budgets?
Yes.
What section is it under, Vicki?
If you look at, let me see here.
I'm just trying to figure out what y'all have gotten year over year, and I'm not sure where it's at.
Well,
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, and you get when we submit the grant recommendations, you get a history. It's like a 6-year history, and it will tell you at the very bottom. It'll have everybody who got grants and a bottom line of what that amount was for that year that was granted out and how much we had available.
Do you know how much you got out of hot tax last year?
Let me see. I'm trying to think if I have that somewhere here. It was I think the total was 578,000.
Okay, so roughly, essentially flat from last year to this year.
Yeah, it was some 578 a little bit, and then the 549 I think is what we actually used for the grant program.
Okay, and then over on your expenditure side, where do y'all put in here? Because I see one that says grants, but it's only 179,000 for this year, and other charges, which is about $500,000. Where do y'all put your grants you put out? Like it's on your expenditures line. Is it under one of these? I'm sure how much is going in for grants, how much is coming out for grants?
Okay, for our local grant program that we fund ourselves, we did $90,425 for the local grants for this year. And those are for, we awarded them this year, and it's for the events that'll take place after October 1 through September 30th. So That's included in that 170, where did I got it? 179, 145, that's included in that. And then we also have in there, it's not just grants, it's our other projects like Walk of Fame and Lubbock Music Now and that sort of thing.
Okay, so the hot tax goes to all of those projects?
No.
It
The
just goes,
179 is not hot tax at all. That
no,
is-
I'm talking about the hot tax that you're gonna get, the 574. That's coming in on our budget sheet that's going in for 25.
we
Where
haven't
is it
granted-
gonna be spent?
It's,
Like, does it all go to grants? Does it go to local projects? Just a
the
simple breakdown. I
570
don't know that, I don't
yeah.
need the exact grants, just,
the 574 will go to the Cultural Art Grant Program. It'll go up to 10% of that will go to the Public Art Program, where we purchase public art for city-owned property. And then I think there's a small amount, maybe about 15,000 or so, that will go for the live music at the airport program, and that's it. That's all that will
that
cover.
comes out of that money?
Yeah.
Okay,
We don't do any of our Civic Lubbock projects out of that money at all.
okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Rose?
Vicki, Roger, thank y'all for being here. We appreciate it. I had a couple questions on, so just to explain to everyone, your funding sources, you've got Civic Center concessions, correct?
We have food and
And
beverage.
then Select a Seat. And then the 180 for the grants, where does that come from?
Okay, the 180 is the 90,000 for local grants, and then we have bingo income, and that's where that goes.
The bingo income on that one? Okay. And then my last question I had, you had other charges here on Select a Seat for $354,491.
Where am I looking? Where are you looking at? I'm sorry.
I'm in the big book, so
Oh,
page
I'm sorry. Okay.
485.
Let me get to that.
So for this year, your other charges are 517,000, and then a big chunk of that is under Select a Seat for 354.
Yes. Okay, so in Select a Seat, there's about 300, I'm trying to think if that's in there or not. On other charges, take a look. Of course, we have, let's see, other charges would include credit card fees that we have to pay when
Okay.
people purchase tickets.
Uh-huh.
That's about 145,000. And then we have commissions that we pay to AXS Software. That is the software company that provides the ticketing platform that we use. And the commissions are of 182,407. So that's a lot of that, other charges.
Okay, so 184 for the software.
182,407.
Uh-huh. Oh,
And
100
145,774 for credit card fees.
for the credit card fees. Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, Vicki. Mr. Atkinson?
Okay, if we're following along in the books, we will be on pages 87 and 88. These are the revenue and then the expense summaries for what are considered your non-major funds, so that's an audit term that goes there. If you can look on the screen just real briefly, I've highlighted in yellow those that you have already gone through because there's an individual detailed budget that goes with them. So I'm going to skip those. We can certainly come back and answer any questions you might have, but these were from the prior day's discussion. So these are considered to be special revenue funds. They all have some unique source of revenue, and then, of course, they'll have a particular allowable use for expense. So if you start at the top, you have the abandoned vehicle fund. So these are the revenues that come back to the city after abandoned vehicles are brought in, stricken through the process and ultimately sold back out. The use of that is going to almost exclusively be for the police department and for special needs that they have that can be paid out of this fund rather than coming out of your operating budget. You have the Animal Assistance Fund. I'm going to skip the Bell Farms Public Improvement District for just a moment. I'm going to go down to Cable Services Fund. Council, at your most recent city council meeting, you had a budget amendment, and the write-up talked about PEG, Public Education and Governmental. PEG and Cable Services Fund are the same thing. This is an add-on fee to certain bills, primarily your cable bill, hence the name Cable Services Fund. Jump down to Charity Care 1115 waiver. That's a new one to provide some health care that cannot be provided through public health today. We can get Mr. Howerton if we need to come up. We've got the Criminal Investigation Fund, also a small fund. Skip the other public improvement district. If it's all right with the mayor, I'll try to pull all the public improvement districts together here in a moment. Your Department of Justice asset sharing, which as you can see, we don't actually budget into that. It has become very rare that there are shares left out of that program through the federal government. So if we get it, we get it. You can spend it only on allowable uses, but it's been pretty nominal. There were times in the past it was more significant. We've covered economic development, the gateway streets, the grants. That's primarily what you saw in community development. The health rebates and insurance, those are dollars that come back primarily through the prescription benefit program, and then of course it goes back into the health fund. We've talked about hotel occupancy tax. Let me highlight the impact fees. You see that on there. That moves up and down based on development, and then of course development in a particular area. Your most recent usage of those impact fees, and it came from two different service areas, was on the Upland 66th to 82nd project. It's an MPO project. It has some federal and some state dollars in it. It has a lot of local money in it, and we were able to get that project going with those two sets of impact fee dollars. Jump down to the court. This is one of their funds that is set aside from fees that are added to tickets. The one underneath, the North and East Lubbock Neighborhood and Infrastructure Fund, again, we've talked about it. Those are your oil royalties. Today, that's a program. Then the expenditure program is through community development. Looking down through the rest of these and a couple that we skipped at the top, the rest are public improvement districts. So let me kind of just talk quickly. What is a public improvement district and kind of how is it different from a TIF or a tax increment financing zone? So a public improvement district is also a geographical boundary. It is petitioned to the city by 50+1% of the property owners therein, and it exists to charge an assessment. People will call it a tax. It looks like a tax. It acts like it. It is not legally a tax. It's an assessment. But it's paid on the property tax bills of those people that own property within the boundary. What does it do? It exists to fund both the installation of and then the long-term maintenance of improvements that are above what the city otherwise would have done. A lot of these PIDs, it's going to primarily be what appears to be a park. So those are mostly not city parks. They are PID parks. A lot of neighborhoods that have nice entry features or big median areas. Those are things that are done in a public improvement district. You can actually do infrastructure if it is public infrastructure in a PID. You really only have one at this point that has done it that way, but you'll probably see more in the future. So again, the way this works, you have the petition to create the zone. There is an appointed board. Usually when it first starts, that board is entirely going to be representatives of the developers because they own the land at that point. As the land is divided into lots and built and ultimately sold, those boards transition to where they're homeowners. They are self-elected boards. Those boards have to meet at least once a year. that once a year they create a 10-year service plan, kind of like we show the 5-year rolls on our budgets. They have to do a 10-year. And what they're doing is taking their revenue, the expenses that they need. If they have to adjust the assessment, they can. Ultimately, the council blesses all of those, but those are dollars raised from within that zone to be spent on top of that zone, and they are above and beyond the property tax that is paid. We said yesterday in a TIF, every property is paying the same rate of tax that any other property is, just a piece of it goes to their unique geography. This in a PID is an assessment above and beyond the property tax, but it provides the unique benefit in that area. Often get asked, does that mean those public improvements, those parks, can they then only be used by people that live in that district? No, they are public improvements, but the people in that area voluntarily chose to pay for them, and so they have them. So there's a summary of the PIDs. You can see you have a laundry list of them. I will tell you that the use of this tool to provide amenities in neighborhoods just continues to grow, and it's a good tool. It really is. So is a TIF, but they're set up a little bit differently. So can flip over to the expense side, Mayor, if you would like, and then maybe take questions. It's hard to see flipping between the two pages. Generally, in those PIDs, they will try to have a little more revenue than they have expense to try to keep their maintenance funds basically in hand and growing. If you look on the impact fee line item as an example, we showed you the revenue on the prior. I talked about using impact fees for the Upland 66 to 82nd project. You see that in fiscal year 24. At this point in fiscal year 25, we do not have an impact fee appropriate project planned, but they may come up. One of the things that the impact fees are able to do is assist the city in funding your portion of a developer's agreement. So a developer's agreement would be similar to the project that was approved to get paving down on South Quaker from 146 down to Woodrow Road, of course, where Cooper High School is, or Liberty Cooper High School is. That one was set up a number of years ago, so it was not our part was not funded out of impact fees, but a similar project today could be. So it's a whole lot of line items on there, but there's your quick summary of such.
Are there any questions? All right.
Okay, with that, we have now completed the 800-plus pages of budget. What we would like to do, Mayor, if it's all right, I'd like to bring up Mr. Franklin. We want to give you a recap of where you are in the current year's street maintenance program, so that's the $13.5 million, and then further show you what we would do if the $14.5 million for next year is ultimately approved. Would you want me to try to flip the slides, or?
I think I've got them here. Either way works.
If you want them, I'll unplug.
Either way. Coming up. All right, there we go. First, I want to go ahead and kick off with the current street maintenance program that we have, and then kind of come into the street maintenance program that's scheduled for 2025. So as you recall, 2024, the year that we're in right now, there was $13.5 million allocated for street maintenance. 13 of that was cash, and 500,000 was gateway specifically assigned for inside the loop. There are several things that we do in our street maintenance program. We have our Rejuvenator product. That is our product that we use on our best conditioned streets. It's a very affordable product that we can do to help bring back the oxidized asphalt in kind of the best bang for our buck as far as product. Currently under construction with, so actually that one's already completed. Have a $1.1 million that we spent this year. We have our concrete and our asphalt patching contracts. Both of those are exactly what they say. They're patching areas of concrete where we have base failures, or areas of concrete where we have mainly those valley gutters where water crosses the roads. We go and we patch those areas, and usually that's ahead of a mill and relay project that comes the following year. Out of those projects, we budgeted about $9 million between the two of those, and they're currently under construction. And I'll kind of show where those are here on the next page. We also have a mill and relay projects. That's where we kind of mentioned earlier when we were talking about street bonds, where we go and we mill a certain depth of the street off and put a new street surface back on. We have Memphis from 98 to 106th Street, Avenue A from 17th to 34th Street, North Holly Avenue, it's over there by the County Detention Center, and then 82nd Street in various locations between Frankfort and Milwaukee. That is also currently under construction, and we finished the Memphis portion, Avenue A portion, and we're currently working on the North Holly right now. This is just kind of a general area where all those locations are. With the asphalt and concrete patching is that pink color right there. That's those neighborhoods that we go in and we do handle the areas where we have major base failures. And that's usually ahead of a mill and relay, overlay project, and you'll see in 2025, you'll see where we're coming back to address that in those neighborhoods. Currently, in the proposed 2025 street maintenance program, we have about $14.5 million in the proposed budget. Again, $14 million of that is cash, with $500,000 coming out of the Gateway Fund for specific use inside the loop. Our rejuvenator product that we do, we have allocated about $1.2 million. Go ahead and get those done with areas shown here in the table. We also have our asphalt and concrete patching. Those have kind of come down because we did a large asphalt and patching projects for the last couple of years. We're looking in the Kingsgate and Melanie Park South areas. And then our resurfacing, that is our microsurfacing. That's the one that comes on and finishes the overall phase of street maintenance in residential neighborhoods, and that gives a nice smooth street. We're looking at the Lowry Field area, Lindale Acres and Briarcroft, Jackson Mahon, Habitat for Humanity, Ryan Smith, San Jose, and a couple thoroughfares along 82nd Street. And with that, I've got a map indicated for those where those areas are for our proposed area in this coming summer next year. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Are there any questions?
There we go.
All right. Very good.
I'll be around if you have some.
Mayor Pro Tem has a question.
Do we have any, like a timeline of when these projects will be completed, started, finished?
Yes, those are various. The first one that we usually do, and of course the funding has to come on first. We have to put specifications together, bid them out, and then especially our rejuvenator usually goes first, because that's a contract that we have that carries over from year to year, so that's one that's easy to get done. And then our asphalt and concrete patching usually comes next. And then our microsurfacing, of course, anything asphalt has to occur in our asphalt seasons when the weather's warm. So most of these will occur in the summer of 2025.
I know that the city's growing. We're attempting the bond project, and I know in the perfect world you would like more money, but how are we? It seems like we're doing more with less.
Absolutely, with the money that's appropriated that we get, and I'd spend anything you gave me essentially. But we do have limited resources and also limited contractors, as we talked about with the bond. We utilize contractors for some of these, so we have limited resources and get those taken care of. And we do those the best of our ability with the funds provided, and we have a good group of staff that work in that area.
I know that the citizens, I get a lot of complaints and questions about streets. It costs money. And I think sometimes the public doesn't realize that we would have to raise their taxes in order to give them the full meal deal. So I just felt like I needed to mention that, because there's not enough money.
Yes.
And, but I appreciate what you guys do.
And I'd like to elaborate a little bit more. This is just our capital projects for street maintenance. We also have our operating and street maintenance, where we handle our in-house. That's where our pothole repair crews, and that's where we do projects and basically the stuff that we do year-round with our city staff. That comes out of our operating fund. This right here is just our capital projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, how much do you have allocated for potholes?
I don't have that on top of my head.
Okay, but all these projects are projects that will be completed within the year.
Right, these are the capital projects that go out, and we bid these out usually through contracts, and they'll be done in the 2025 year. And then the operating budget's what we do in-house year-round.
Yeah, and I'll add just a little bit to that. They are very good at spending all of these dollars. If a small amount falls out, a contract came in good, but it's not enough to move to another block, because these are capital projects, those dollars fall into next year. So if there were to be 100,000 that was left from the 13.5 million, it goes on top of the new money. So it does not get swept. This money carries.
Yeah, and our projects don't always follow the fiscal year, so they kind of roll.
The weather has a lot to do with when Wood and his guys can do a bunch of this stuff.
So we're in the asphalt season now, right?
You're right in the middle of the asphalt
All
season
right.
right now, and
All right.
and laying asphalt today, actually.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Franklin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, council, I've got just a quick list that I know I owe you at some level on a follow-up. So I'm going to run through that and then quickly tell you what the next steps are in the process. I do want to thank you for your time and attention. There has been a tremendous amount of information set on the table, so I know and I hope everybody's still chewing through all of that. But some of your follow-up items, the list I've got, when I'm finished, if I've missed anything, tell me. We're going to bring back to you an evaluation and possibly a recommendation on the $5.6 million PFC bond at the airport other than using it through reserve cash. We have provided the water and wastewater profile. We've shown it. We haven't sent it to you. This is the debt profile. We're completing the general fund debt profile, so I will send all of those to you at once, and you'll have a copy of that. We're working on the request for the division chief and fire division chief operations. We had a question about the three fire marshal office firefighter ranks, so we'll have those. Is there anything else on the list that I have missed that we know of at the moment? And we'll add it and keep going.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I had a question about some of the jobs that we are cutting. I noticed that we had kind of a significant list, but if we are going to be working on sewer lines, can we afford to eliminate some of those jobs? I know that they have not been filled, but didn't we have issues with some of the truck maintenance that, I mean, we didn't have the trucks, but now I think we have some of those trucks back in place, and that was part of the reason that those positions didn't exist?
Not sure that I don't believe there's anything related to the fleet, if I'm understanding the question correctly. And I'll be glad to sit with anybody and go over that list one at a time, and, we can talk all about them. But really the only pending decision that might have an impact, and I don't think it would have as much an impact as we first thought, but it might have some, would be the ultimate decision of the council on how to handle the sewer laterals. And of course, that's in the water wastewater fund, so it's enterprise. And anything there will not move over to the general fund either way, in or out. So be glad to get with you and walk through every one of those.
I'd like to look at that, if you don't mind, just
Yes,
because
ma'am.
I know, well, I want to talk to you more about that, just because I just want to make sure if that is something that we put into play, I don't want us to be deficient in staffing again.
And thank you for that. I do appreciate it. And nobody ever wants to give up a position, even if it's vacant, and maybe it's been vacant for a while. My best hope is those employees we end up with, let's get them filled. And I would love to come back next year and say, hey, can I put one back? But yeah, we'll go through that list with you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, next steps real quick, and Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you. Council, just a quick reminder, your meeting on Tuesday, August the 13th, you will see two different items on that agenda related to the budget. The first is just the same posting we've used for this will reappear as a work session item. So that is another opportunity for you as a group of the whole. If you've got more questions, if anything that we need to bring up, I will use that time briefly to report back on a few of these items that are on this list. We can use as little or as much of that time as the council would like to use. And again, everybody is welcome and encouraged. Get with me, get with the senior team, get with Cheryl. You're bound to and should have questions. Anything we can work through, we want to do that for you. So you will see that work session item, and that is to continue this type of discussion from today. There will be one action item on the agenda on the 13th, and that is for the council to propose a maximum tax rate. That is not adopting a tax rate. That is not finalizing a budget. None of that happens until your meeting on September 3rd and then on September 10th. It is a statutorily required action that we need in order to complete the publications and provide all the appropriate public notice that you're working on the budget. That is the rate, once you have selected it and we have published it, that is the rate that you cannot go over. You are not obligated ultimately to adopt that exact rate. You can adopt less than that rate. You cannot adopt a rate on September the 3rd and the 10th that is greater than the number that we publish. Does that make sense? So it's just, we're now starting to step into the statutory requirements that ultimately end up with an adopted budget. So those are my two items that'll show up on the 13th. And with that, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you for that presentation. And again, it is not a budget number, it is a rate number. And it's to fulfill our accountability and transparency to the public so that they know in all our discussions, this is the cap and we cannot go above it. So it's a perfunctory or a pro forma item we have to do to fulfill our statutory obligations. So we still have ongoing discussions about the budget, and that vote and the rate vote will take place next month. So thank you again for your attendance, whether you're here or whether you're watching online. As always, our phones are open to you. Our email is open to you. So contact us with your concerns or issues about anything we've discussed today or anything else of concern for you about our budget and our tax rate. So thank you very much. And with that, this work session is concluded.